This is Team Harrow, where resilience meets leadership. I'm your host, Ben Harrow, combat veteran, special forces soldier, and entrepreneur. Each week, we dive into powerful stories from high performers who lead, adapt, and overcome. Let's get after it. All right, 3, 2, 1, launch. Dan, here we are.
Good to see you, man.
Yep.
It's been a while.
It has.
We've been talking about this for a while now.
I've been wanting to bring you on here ever since we became buddies like 2 years ago. We obviously started been doing the Reset series together, but I'm glad to finally have you on here and
yeah, me too.
Interview you on.
It's gonna be fun
on Team Harrow and tell some of your background and stories as well, because obviously, and we'll get into it, and I'll let you introduce your background, but college athlete as well, military service as well, some, I guess we'll call it special operations or special activity type stuff as well, which I'll let you skirt the line of what you can and can't say or want to say. But definitely talking some more of your entrepreneurial and business adventures and where that kind of led you down.
Okay.
So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Where I fell down.
That's a big one too.
Good part.
That's a big piece to this whole the Team Harrow podcast and the stories that people on here, right, about like the resilience piece. So
for sure.
People get injured, people fall down, people make mistakes, people have to kind of figure things out, and being able to rebuild and the progress of rebuilding. I think we've talked about it before, but like for me, my big vision of like success isn't always necessarily like, the car, the girl, the house, the trophy. It's more of like, am I continually making progress? Am I improving myself? And obviously stepping on a bomb and getting injured, it was a huge setback, but I was able to continually, rebuild myself and get myself back up and walking. And I know, in a way you stepped on a bomb too.
Sure.
And, we'll dive into that, but let's start with, where you're from and maybe how you got into the military and start from there.
Sure. Some of the basic stuff we talked about once before, maybe on the Reset series, so I won't dwell on a lot of that, but born and raised in Maine, grew up in a small town.
The heir to the maple syrup fortune of, right?
Lumberjack rich.
You're lumberjack rich.
Rich money. Yeah, I mean, I just thought everybody had flannel growing up, and it was funny. We'll have friends in town when we're back home in Maine, and we'll take them to LL Beans, and they'll be like, "Oh, wow, this is such a big place." But I mean, I think we talked about a lot. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but a lot like you growing up, sports was kind of my outlet to be social, and most of my friends were in sports circles. And then my family, I think, was pretty middle class family. Couldn't really afford to send me to school, so I decided to enlist in the Navy, and I definitely got duped by my recruiter because you learn a lot of things later when you look back on things about how stuff was done. But I signed up for the Navy nuclear power program. Don't ask me why. But I went through
your IQ scores, right? When you took the SFAT, whatever it's called, the test.
So first of all, I love every branch of the service, and I have great relationships with a lot of men and women who have served the country in every branch, from Army, Navy, Air Force to Marine Corps. But I always joke with my Marine Corps friends the most. I'm like, dude, I wanted to be a Marine, but my ASVAB test scores were too high, and they wouldn't accept me.
So they put you on nuclear submarines.
So they put me on nuclear subs instead. But no, I mean, so it was funny. I enlisted out of high school, and I went to boot camp, and it's funny, a lot of stories we tell when we're together and offline about things that you remember. It's interesting, the things that you look back on and remember. But I just remember, standing at attention and being yelled at by one of our drill instructors, and I'm like, man, what did I get myself into? Like, what's going on here? But graduated from boot camp and went out to the fleet and was working on an aircraft carrier, and just remember the feeling of like, I don't really think this is what I want to do. There's got to be something else. And I heard about an officer candidate program, which I applied for, called NAPS, and I was declined. It was the Naval Academy Prep School. I applied for a Chief Warrant Officer flight program. I was attached to an aviation squadron at the time, thought maybe I wanted to fly. I applied to a program called Boost, and it was actually set up by the Navy's Equal Opportunity Fund foundation, so it was targeted towards minorities, but they accepted a couple average white kids.
6'5" white guy.
Yeah. I guess that's a minority. I don't know. But if you graduate from that, which I did, they send you to the Naval Academy, or they give you an ROTC scholarship. You can attend any ROTC university. So that's what I did. I didn't learn about the Naval Special Warfare community until I was in San Diego going through Boost. I told you that story one day, but long story short, I set my sights on being in that community, and so I compress my curriculum at college so that I can graduate in 3 years instead of 4, because I know that I'm a little bit older. I was 21 when I went to college, and so most of the guys, kind of like what you told me about how your special operations community tries to tap people that have a little bit more experience. So that was my goal, was to get accepted into that community. My CO at my ROTC unit kind of tried to talk me out of it. Like, hey, man, there's only 5 slots this year when you graduate for ROTC. The rest of the slots for officers are going to Naval Academy grads. But I stuck it out, and I was accepted to BUDS, which was great. Went to BUDS in 1993. I was in BUDS Class 191. And then I experienced probably we're going to talk a lot today, I think, about, different tipping points or different turning points where you and I were on various parts of our journey in our life. This was one of the first big ones for me. I was injured in a training incident going through BUDS, and tried to heal myself, tried to get better.
Was it prior to Hell Week or after? Like, what part of
it was in phase 2, so it was after Hell Week. We did things a little bit differently in the 90s than the way they do it today. You used to go through phase 4 first, which was what is now BUDS or pre-BUDS, so there's a pre-phase. So we went through about 6 weeks of pre-phase, and then phase 1, 2, and 3, which is broken down into 3 different kind of geared towards specific things.
Yeah.
So the whole process now should be a little more than 6 months. Back then it was about a 10-month process, at least when I was in it was. So I was injured, and I was faced with making a decision about, okay, here's something I've done for the last 7 years of my life, where I was on this road, and I was on this path, and this is what I wanted to be, and this was becoming, at least for me, kind of the definition of who I thought I would be as a man. I had just made lieutenant junior grade, which is 02 in the Navy, and I suffered this injury. And for me, I think also one of the challenges was there were budget cutbacks in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And so when I was commissioned as a reserve officer who was on active duty status, meaning that sometime during that 2-year active duty window, I had to augment to full-time USN status. And what I didn't know when I accepted the opportunity to go to BUDS was that if anything happened to me during that time, I was out of the Navy. So I'm about 18 months into my cycle, and they said, well, you can re-enlist for another 8 years, and we'll send you to the fleet for 2 years, and then you can try and come back and go through BUDS again. And it was just really, it was an awkward time. I look back on it with some regret, to be candid with you. Like, I wish it hadn't happened, and I wish I could have stayed on the path. I look back at some of my former classmates, and I look at where they are in their careers now, and I maintain contact with some of them. But I think for me, it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
And that's when my first look at working for the government happened. There is a network, a good old boy network, as you know, of people from various communities, special operations communities, whether it be in different branches of the service or the government in my case, where they reach out and they say, hey, we've got this guy, he's a prior enlisted officer, he's a good dude, but he got broke. Would you guys be interested in taking a look at him? And so I left San Diego and I went to Washington, D.C. to out-process from active duty service, and I interviewed with a lot of different government agencies. And you name it, man, every 3-letter agency, FBI, DEA, CIA, Secret Service, everybody across the board. And there was a hiring freeze in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And no government roles were open in just about any place. And so I think the first time that I got word from a government agency that they were interested in me was probably 90-something, like 95 time frame. And it was from the FBI first. And I remember saying to the guy who was my point of contact, my liaison, well, can you put me on an HRT? Because I still had that mindset of, well, if I can't...
Doing something tactical.
Yeah, if I can't, chase bad guys in the military, I'll do that in the government, but I want it to be in a role where I can control my destiny. And having felt like a little bit like maybe the Navy kind of misled me down this path because the recruiter put me into the slot, and then I had to take this circuitous route to get my commission, and my degree. So I thought I could ask for that up front. Turns out you can't, and I didn't know. So I turned down the FBI job offer, and then there were a few other job offers. So I kind of kicked that around for a little while I was working in the private sector for a company called Merrill Lynch. There was a Navy 06, which is a captain, who would get a list of all the young officers who were exiting from active duty from his point of contact at the Pentagon, and it was old days, right? So he would literally cold call everybody, and he said, hey, this is who I am, this is where I work. We know that young naval officers have a 75% more likely rate of succeeding in this career field because we put them through the training in Princeton, New Jersey. You get your Series 7, 63, 65, life insurance, health insurance, et cetera. So I went to work at Merrill Lynch for a little while. And then that was the first time that the government came back to me and made me a job offer, which we'll talk more a little bit later about what type of work that was. And so I stayed up in the D.C. area for a little while and worked in the civilian sector for a little while. And then 9/11 happened. And that's when I reached back out to all my contacts at the government. And I said, look, I got to do my part, right?
Yeah.
Like, put me in, coach. And started going through the process of working for a different government organization as a full-time job. And that process was interesting. It was at a time where we didn't really have the GWAT at that point yet. I mean, the U.S. has constantly been in some kind of a engagement.
We didn't have the knowledge of the GWAT, I guess, because it was the very beginning of the global war on terror.
Yeah. So it was an interesting time because I think that the process that I went through, I probably went under a lot more scrutiny, maybe not that there was less scrutiny prior to that, but I think everybody's awareness of what was going on globally was just so heightened and it was so sensitive. But at the same time, there was a huge push with billions of dollars of funding to make up for mistakes or things that had been overlooked. Failures on
in terms of gathering intelligence to prevent or predict or deter the attacks.
Yeah. So obviously you and I both know that hindsight is always 20/20, right? After you come back from doing a job or doing a mission, you have the ability to sit down and evaluate things that happened. And so while I'm not any kind of an expert on anything that happened in the intelligence community, like most Americans who pay attention to what happens, especially people that work in our line of work, we had the ability to look back on it and say, oh man, we missed this and we missed that, and we could have done this and we could have done that. So there was a big push that was driven by funding to ramp up capabilities in areas where they hadn't previously been as strong as they could have been, because obviously we don't ever want to be asleep on watch again and let something like that happen. And so that's when I ended up going back to work for the government. And we'll talk more about that later. I moved to South Florida in 2004. So I've been here now for how many years is that? 21 years?
Yeah.
Ish. And I actually started a business which is conveniently located 2 doors down. I didn't start the business here. We moved here, but I started it here in Delray Beach. And I had been doing trying to do some work in the private security contractor field in Iraq. And I kept running into the same problem where a lot of my friends who were there, who I knew from the military, or friends that had maybe graduated with me in ROTC that were Navy option or Marine Corps option, were there. And they kept running into the same issue with helmets and plates and vests and tactical gear and things that they couldn't get. And so I called a friend of mine, and he happened to be the rep at Oakley at the time. And I said, hey, I got some guys here that I'm working with. They need some gear. Can you hook them up? One thing led to another, and from 2004 to about maybe 2019, so for about 15 years, I ended up building what became a pretty big distribution business that supplied law enforcement, military, government agencies, federal contractors with PPE, with personal protective equipment. And while I was going through that journey, I ended up starting a brand as well. So this company was called Tactical Products Group, and the brand was called TAC Pro Gear. And I think we could spend a little bit of time sort of talking about that story because it's an interesting company that we built. But we just kind of fell into a niche where I had this knowledge of the military from being in it. I had knowledge of how the government worked from working there. I understood the product requirements of the end users because I had used some of the equipment, not all of the equipment. A lot of my friends had used the equipment or had knowledge about equipment that I didn't have. So I started to do what we were taught how to do in the military, which was bring in friends whom I trusted and hire people whom I trusted that were subject matter experts in their particular field. So, when we got into weapon systems, I hired an ex-military former DEA guy who knew everything about weapons. And when we started to get into body armor, I hired guys that were body armor experts. And when we started to get into these different branches of the military, I hired a former Army SF guy to be my Army liaison. And from 2004 to about 2019, when I got out of the business, I experienced what I think was probably the American dream, right? Like I grew this company from a little retail shop with 3 employees where I built the desks and the computers and the showroom and everything to about a $35 million business that had the 2 components. It had a brand. Within that brand, we had TAC Pro Gear, which was primarily manufactured in Vietnam in the factory that used to be the Black Hawk Products Group factory. Mm-hmm. And then we had an American line of products called TPG Black that we manufactured in the building next door here. And that was primarily NIJ certified soft armor, body armor packages, level 3 and level 3A packages. And then we had an OEM program where we had plate companies manufacture plates for us, helmet companies manufacture helmets for us. On the products that we manufactured here in the U.S., we had about 40 or 50 products: pockets, pouches, slings, vests, carriers, that type of stuff, mostly soft goods and nylon. On the TAC Pro Gear side that was made overseas, we had about 600 products and about maybe 2,400 SKUs because we had all 4 colors that would be used by the customers. We had footwear, we had clothing, we had apparel, etc. And building that company was amazing because I was able to, I started out going to my first SHOT Show in 2004, and fast forward 15 years later, we had, 15 global trade shows that we went to around the world. We did IDEX in Abu Dhabi and in Paris. We did SOFEX in Amman, Jordan. We did Millipol in Paris and in London. We did LAD in Brazil. So it was definitely the adventure so far of my lifetime building that company, and I still look back on it with a lot of affinity and fondness for the brands that we created and the relationships that I made with people along the way. And so I'm running on, man. I've been going for
you're good.
For like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I want to you have ask me some questions or something.
No,
I feel like my mouth's getting a little dry here, man. I got down the rabbit hole.
Here.
Thanks, brother.
No, it's just interesting to hear, and we don't have to focus too much on the government stuff that you did, but let's focus on the business, because it is the American dream.
Yeah.
And what everyone's just trying to start a business, and like you said, you grow it from 3 employees, probably 1 including yourself, where you're literally assembling the desk in the office, to, and it's interesting the time frame, right? Like 2004 to 2019. You're riding the wave of the GWAT.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's like government contract, like a lot of companies and businesses did during the global war on terror, where they relied on the government to be their biggest client, right? I mean, that's where you're getting most of your revenue. And it's going and going and going. And then I guess let's fast forward to maybe 2019, almost like a movie. Things seem to be going great and the company is growing and building. What happened next? Yeah,
so building the company, I love to talk about, and I love to talk about lessons learned. So
Sure.
I think there's content that we'll use, and things that we'll talk about during things we do on the Reset series, and stories we'll tell about all that. But I think that one of the lessons that I enjoy reflecting on the most is that I think I ended up in a position with my business where I never really focused on trying to make money. I never really focused on, building this brand that had 500 dealers and distributors around the world. I really just was focused on 2 things. Number 1 was trying to surround myself with the best people who had the best skill set and who wanted to work as hard as possible, right? Like they wanted to be the best at whatever it was that they did, whether it was the media production people who managed our social media, whether it was the man or the woman in our factory who was, physically doing the stitching and the assembly of the body armor components that we made, whatever it was that we did, that was number 1. And, empower those people, right? And then just get out of their way. that was the second lesson that I learned, is that the company achieved a lot of success no matter how you measure it, because I just did what we learned how to do in the military, right? Like find the best people for the job and get out of their way, and
give them clear direction and a task and a purpose and an end state, and have them go do great things.
Yeah. And listen, like I was always, my door was always open. I always want to listen to feedback. Things don't have to be done my way. They have to be done the best way. And it doesn't matter who comes up with the idea, right? If it's your idea or the guy who cleans the warehouse floor or the CFO's idea, wherever that idea comes from, collectively we get to listen. Yeah, at the end of the day, I'm the guy who makes the decision, and I'm the guy who has the responsibility for the decision working or not working. But it was really about just building the right team and empowering them, and then just getting the fuck out of their way, and letting them do what it is that they did. And so that's probably a good segues into the story about what happened next. So at the time that the brand was growing and the TPG Black was growing, in our industry, it was very common to purchase other products from other companies that were the actual manufacturer. It's called OEM manufacturing, original equipment manufacturing. And we would take those products and we would put our label on it. And so we had an incident in 2016-ish timeframe, 2015 timeframe. So the company was probably growing and probably a $20 million company. And we had received a purchase order from a commercial customer that we had that was a private security company to purchase 10 plates. We gave them a bid on the 10 plates. It was a $3,500 bid for 10 level 4 ceramic plates. We received the order from the customer. We bought the plates like we always would from one of our regular suppliers. The plates came to our warehouse. One of my employees emailed the guy in the warehouse and said, hey, the plates came in for this order. Make sure you put our labels on it and make sure that the labels match exactly. Meaning that when our company would receive products, we would print a label that had our logo on it with our address and our information, and then we would copy the make, the model, the serial number, the date of manufacture, et cetera, from the label from the company that we received it from. We'd put that on there, and then we'd ship them as ours.
So you guys would receive, like, for example, the plates and the plate carriers, the components, but your company would assemble them and then add maybe a little extra something?
So in this case, when you're talking about ballistic ceramic plates, at the time there were only 3 or 4, maybe a handful of manufacturers who would make these plates. As the manufacturer, they would ship them to distributors. So you've got a guy in Boston who sells to local PD. You've got a guy in Houston who sells to Army. You've got a guy in California who sells to LAPD. Those products would be shipped from the manufacturer to that company. That company would then put their label or their brand name on it so that the customer knows, hey, I got these from Ben's Tactical Supply Company in Boca Raton, Florida, and that's who I bought them from, and that's who's my local guy. So that's what we did. We bought these 10 plates. We put our label on them. We shipped them to the customer. What had happened was the end user for those was a government client, and it wasn't actually the commercial company who we sold them to. They were kind of buying it as a cutout for the government user. And there was a mistake on the labels when they were printed and they were sent to the client. And so the government's interpretation of that was that the supplier was trying to defraud the government and, sell them a Porsche, but give them a Volkswagen and just put a Porsche label on it, basically, something like that. And so the first call I received from the guys who were in my office, I was traveling at a trade show, was that, hey, there's some FBI guys here and they're kicking around, and asking questions about plates and how we buy plates and who we buy plates from. And so my initial reaction was, well, that's fine. You can answer any question that they have. It's FBI guys, I wouldn't worry about it. And so fast forward. So what happened was, one of my employees became the subject of an FBI investigation, and the reason was that the plates were mislabeled incorrectly. So we had no idea what was going on. The subject of the investigation turned into the target of an investigation, which is just another legal way for saying, okay, we intend to prosecute you.
It's getting escalated.
It's getting escalated, correct. There's a lot more to the story, which we won't talk about. We can talk about some other time. But there's an interesting note, which is, I'm not sure that I can say it, but I'm going to say it anyways. Hopefully no one who's listening, no one cares. But I was actually working, let's just say I was working with the FBI at the time.
Okay.
On something else. And so I call my friend at the FBI and I say, hey, I don't know what this is, but there's a couple of your guys here that are kicking around asking some questions about something. here's the guy, he left his card, can you call him and find out what's going on? And he said, oh man, I'm sure it's nothing, I'll get to the bottom of it. He found out what it was, called me back and said, I'm sure it's nothing, you got nothing to worry about, don't think anything of it. And then 8 months later, my employee gets told that he's going to be indicted on federal charges for conspiracy to defraud the government. And so, of course, I hire him a lawyer, and I hire a lawyer for myself to represent the company, because at this point, I don't know if the company is in trouble or if the employee is in trouble. But like any military officer would do, my people are my people, and they're my team. So I make a decision to defend the employee, and I enter into a co-defense agreement, meaning that myself and the company will be partnered with this employee because he did nothing wrong. The guy in the warehouse did nothing wrong. A mistake was made, and that was my opinion, and so we will defend this person. What I didn't realize also at the time was that if you or your company or one of your employees ever becomes the subject and then the target of a federal investigation, and then you're indicted, you are going to trial, and you're probably not going to win because the U.S. government has a 90-something plus success rate in these cases. So around...
This is all over 10 SAPI plates, 10 ceramic plates that people put in their vests, their bulletproof vests.
Yes.
Being mislabeled.
Yes. Now listen, so trust me when I tell you 1,100,000 times I've gone over this scenario in my mind, okay? I've tried to look at it from the standpoint of, I understand how the government felt, and I understand why they felt it was wrong. I've tried to look at it from the standpoint of, it was a mistake. The plates were never fielded. Nothing was wrong with the plates. We had them tested during the investigation phase, and they passed ballistic tests, so there was no question of the integrity of it. But, you know, I look at both sides, and then I ask myself the question, okay, well, nobody was hurt. We could have returned the plates. I think the company made a $350 profit on a $3,500 order, which, you know, to put it into perspective, we donated hundreds of plates, so it wasn't like we were trying to be greedy and make a whopping $350. Like, if I were where we're going with this story is kind of like this. I've told you this before too. I wish I had a really cool story to tell you, like, about something really fucked up that I did. Yeah. Like the time I pretended I was, you know.
You stole the Hope Diamond?
Yeah. You know, I used to smuggle shit, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not a glamorous story. You know the outcome, so I'll get to that. So I end up getting indicted individually, not the company, because I'm the owner of the company, along with the employee who worked for me, who he and I are still good friends to this day. Obviously, it was a real strain on our relationship. And I decided to fight it. So in September of 2018, I received notice from the government that I'm being indicted on federal charges of conspiracy to defraud the government. That is...
I mean, like, did you ever just go, guys, we're talking about I'm not defrauding anybody. Like, this is a simple mistake. Like, look at the chain of how this went down. I mean, I'm sure you've, like you said, thought this out in your head 1,000 times. And like,
no, I mean,
or were you just, or was it like an ego thing where you're just like, you know, you felt like you couldn't be untouchable? I don't know. Like,
So, a couple things. I never spoke to anybody. I was investigated, but I never was investigated by an FBI special agent who said, hey, Dan, so what happened here?
Yeah.
Or how does this happen? Like, I literally never spoke to anybody. I spoke through my lawyers to a lot of people and explained, hey, this is the OEM world. This is what happens. Mistakes do happen, but, you know, we caught the mistake. And so we tried to make up for the mistake. But I think that the first thing that is a wake-up call is, you know, you receive that notice and you get a notice in the mail that says these charges are being brought to you. It's not like Hollywood where someone knocks on your door. And I mean, for some people it does, right? The door gets kicked down and an FBI HRT team where I thought I wanted to work shows up and, you know, they take you out at 2 a.m. But for me, it was more of a legal process where they said, okay, we're coming after you. At that point, yes, to answer your question, I think I definitely felt overconfident in the fact that, look, by that point in my life, I think I'd taken an oath 3 times. to defend my country and the Constitution, et cetera. And so I'm thinking, well, you guys have this wrong, right? Like, this is who we are. This is who I am. Yes, mistakes happen, but my employees didn't do anything wrong, and we'll stand by them. And so I take it to trial, which is extremely expensive. But thank God the company's doing well, and thank God we have the cash reserves to be able to fight it. And so I think, looking back for me, that's one of the first times where, you and I are used to being able to control situations, and when there are things beyond your control and you can't control the narrative, it becomes frustrating because you just want to. There's got to be something I can do to change the situation and make it better. I remember at one point, the federal prosecutor, through my attorney, said, "Look, we'll give you a plea deal. We'll guarantee, no jail time, no prison time, no nothing, but take a felony charge." And I'm thinking, well, 50-something% of my business relies on our ability to serve subcontracts on federal government contracts. If I do that, well, life's not over, but my business is over. And, I even if I believe in my heart that nobody did anything wrong, to do that would be to make an admission of being guilty. So I don't really, I'm kind of diametrically opposed to that. So I don't know if that was overconfidence or being cocky or, I'm just going to defend this. So we go to trial in February of 2019, and I lose. And the guy who is the co-defendant loses, and I just remember, sitting there, and that part is kind of Hollywood, in that when the judge, there's a jury, right? So the jury goes away and they recess and they look at all the facts, and I won't bore you and go through all the trial stuff. How long did it
take for the jury to
reach a verdict?
Yeah.
I left the federal courthouse in Alexandria at about, I don't know, it was the afternoon of maybe the third day. The actual trial part didn't take extremely long. And my lawyer said, so let me tell you a little bit about it, okay? So there's two things that I'll tell you that are interesting, I find, and one of them will dance around something. So we had to conduct what's called SEPA hearings, and it's an acronym for Classified or Confidential Information Privacy Act or something, because of the nature of the work that I had done for the government, as well as the fact that I had a relationship at the time of this incident with the FBI. And the reason they had to do the SEPA hearings was because they couldn't tell the jury and they couldn't discuss in an open public court the nature of the work that I had done. And the nature of the work that I had done was very important. So my defense attorneys thought, because it demonstrated the character of the man who I am, right? I can say I'm a good guy, but then if you see a guy down at the bar and he's, drinking and he's fooling around on his wife and he's doing this and doing that, talk is cheap, but the actions of an individual and of a man speak volumes about who he is. And so the defense attorney had suggested to the prosecution and to the judge, hey, look, this is who this guy is. He took an oath out of high school, to defend his country, enlisted in the Navy, was picked up for officer candidate school, graduated with honors, was, commissioned as an officer, took his second oath for a second time as an officer, and, who intended to serve in the special warfare community but was injured. Came back to the government, took a third oath to work for the government after 9/11. Here's a guy who built his career serving his country. And, unlike in the military where sometimes you're recognized for acts of valor or things that you do, when you're working in the government doing the work we did, no one knows what I did. You don't do it for the glory. You don't do it for the fame. Explaining to them, look, this is the kind of guy who, this is how he built his career.
The service aspect of it. Yeah.
So to think that this same guy who spent his entire career doing this went out of his way to make $350 to defraud the government is absurd.
Yeah.
But they couldn't talk about a lot of those things openly. So number one is these, they had to conduct these classified hearings where it was just the judge, the prosecution, and my lawyer. I wasn't even allowed in the room where they would talk about these things. And they came up with a list of 10 pre-approved questions that the defense attorney could ask two people that took the stand for me. And we won't talk about who they are, and we won't talk about what the questions were, even though it's public record.
Yeah.
But they were only allowed to ask 10 questions. And so, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, this is kind of great because, clearly the jury must be smart and they're going to figure out who I am and what came from it. But I think that after that period was done where these two guys were interviewed and asked these 10 very specific questions, I'm looking at the jury and they're kind of like, man, what just happened? What? so this guy worked for the government, but we don't know where, and he did something
they weren't able
but we don't know what.
They weren't able to put two and two together of like for myself, coming from the special operations community and working with other government agencies, hearing your story and the little bit that you told me in the very beginning when we first met, I was able to put two and two together and be like, oh, I know who he is. I know where he worked. I know what he did.
Right.
But people that are off the street that are supposed to be your peers in the jury box, they have no idea. And that's what I think that didn't help.
I'm sitting there and I'm sort of like, oh, well, you get it, right? And they're like, like scratching their heads. So that was one moment. And then the second moment I want to share is the distributor who sold us the plates took the stand, and defense attorney said to him, and tell me the process, sir, of how you obtained these plates and what you did when you got them and then how they were sent to this company. And he said, oh, well, we got them from the manufacturer. We took the manufacturer's label off. We put our label on, and then we shipped them to Dan's company. Because why would we ship the products with the manufacturer's label? If Dan's company knew who it was, they wouldn't buy from us. They'd go directly to the manufacturer. And we're in business to make money. So we buy them, we mark it up, and we sell it to somebody else. And my attorney says to me, kind of like, on a notepad, and leans over and he says, man, you're set. Like, that's it. Like, he literally just admitted he did the same thing that you did, but you're here, defending your company for doing something that's viewed as wrong. Like, you're good to go.
Yeah.
So, you asked the question how long it took. I think it was like maybe four hours after the jury came back, and I'm looking at my lawyer and I'm like, that's a good thing, right? Like, this was a slam dunk. You said that they heard from the other guy, and it was a slam dunk, but it went in the other direction. So, the judge says guilty, and it's a very surreal moment because, it's one of those things where your life kind of flashes before your eyes, and you're like, man, I've, enlisted in the service, 20 years of my life have now gone by, and this is where I am. Like, okay, but I can fight this, right? Like, something's going to happen, and I can file an appeal, or I can do this, or I can do that. So we lose in February of 19, myself and my buddy, and I get sentenced in May, which is pretty quick, like about 3 months later. And you don't know what's going to happen at the sentencing, right? And
like, can the sentencing, what's the best and the worst case scenario for the sentencing?
Yeah. So when a conviction is handed down, there are guidelines and they're called sentencing guidelines that the judge uses. The judge uses those guidelines, and based upon those guidelines and based upon what the charges are, there's essentially like a scale, right? And the scale is 0 to a bazillion months, and there are different steps on the scale that it goes up. So if the charges are X, Y, and Z, then it could be this, and you fall within this window. And then if other charges are A, B, and C, it could be this, and it falls into this window. Then they take into account things like if you have a prior record, if something's happened before, they can do what's called enhancements. So if you show, for example, no remorse, if you're like, yeah, I did it and I'd do it tomorrow, all those things can be taken into account. And so in anticipation of the sentencing, defense lawyers will recommend that you get letters of recommendation from friends, people who've known you for a long time, clients, customers, whoever you can, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna call everybody I know. I get like 75 letters from senior military officials and senior federal government officials and elected officials and friends and people who know my character and the church that I go to and the school that I volunteer at. And I kind of build this dossier of like, hey, who
you are recommendation wise.
Again, back to the, like, you can say that you're a good dude, but this is what people say about me. And these aren't people who, like, they don't have a dog in this fight. This is my life. But it's a scary feeling. And then you're given 2 minutes to address the judge and just say whatever it is that you want to say. And I don't remember exactly what I said because it's all still, like, it's not a blur, but I do think that your brain wants to help kind of like protect you sometimes from trauma.
Sure.
Right? So my trauma's, I feel like an idiot saying this in front of you. It's different than what you've gone through. But when we've talked about your story, I know that there are memories that you have, and then some of them are kind of fuzzy, right? Because I think your brain wants to protect you from certain parts of that. So yeah, I kind of remember I was, I said to the judge, like, hey, I'm a guy who's taken an oath to defend this country on multiple occasions. I never even met the people who are the investigators, what I shared with you. Like, I wish they had just asked me what happened. I'm sorry that it happened. I'm grateful that, the product wasn't faulty, or that nobody was hurt, or what if someone was killed wearing our product? Like, and I'm sorry for what happened. And, I'm here, Judge, so whatever you see fit to do, I'll accept. And, I'm grateful for your time, et cetera. And so then the judge says, and he gives the guy who was the target a 4-month sentence. He serves 2 months in a federal prison camp, I think in Coleman. He gives me a 10-month sentence, and I serve 6 months in federal prison camp Pensacola. And man, again, it's just like it's so surreal. And there's so many other things we can talk about. From like, we could talk about what happened during, because I've got some funny and fucked up stories. We can talk about what happened after.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with this. You get sentenced, you find out the verdict, the judge hits the gavel.
What's next?
Do you say goodbye? Is it like in the movies, like you say goodbye to your family and they leave you out?
No.
Or like,
yeah, so there was no, it wasn't like Hollywood.
Like, what's it like going to jail?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
In my particular case, I'm this older, I don't know if race plays an effect, so I don't want to sound racist because I don't care about race, but like, I'm an older white guy convicted of a white collar crime, right? I'm not like some drug dealing thug. So maybe other people get treated differently, but for me, they say, okay, you've been sentenced, so there'll be a pre-something hearing, and then you'll get a letter in the mail that tells you when you have to self-report, basically. So I wasn't arrested. There were no handcuffs.
Yeah.
It's not like on TV where you see like murder victims and you're in chains. I was never handcuffed once. Didn't have to go to any jail. I was told to self-report on July 31st, Pensacola in 2019, which in a weird fucked up way was probably kind of a good thing for me, being prior Navy, because I'm going to live on a Navy base for 6 months. At the time, I thought it was 10. So you go and you self-report and you show up and you give them your ID. And there's definitely, there's like a shame thing that they put you through where they strip search you, and then they make you put on an orange jumpsuit for like 30 minutes just to make you feel like it's real. And let me tell you, dude, it's real. Like, you're sitting there and every single decision you've ever made in your entire life, like, man, when I was 15 and I snuck that beer out of my uncle's fridge, maybe that's why I'm here. It's insane. When you have the time, we'll go through a couple things. I put on the orange jumpsuit. I walk over to basically like exactly the same as when we were in the military. You go over to the gear locker. Yeah. You check in. They give you your loadout, which my loadout was different. It was like 4 green uniforms, pants and shirts, 4 T-shirts, 4 underwear, socks, the whole 9 yards. They give you all the clothes that you're allowed to wear. Because in Pensacola at the time, we wore these like kind of Ranger green BDU pants and tops, and a white T-shirt. And so walking around on the base, you're kind of identifiable as somebody who is in prison camp.
Are you able to walk around? I mean, like, I would imagine under some sort of supervision you're walking around the base?
Yeah, so there's the Pensacola Naval Air Station, and then there's an auxiliary site or field next to it, which is where I lived, and it was called Sofley Field. And I wanted to go to this camp because it was considered a work camp. And I didn't know how long I would be sentenced or what would happen to me. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be gone for 4 years, back to your question about the sentencing thing, like the guideline was 48 months. Yeah. So I could have been gone for 4 years. But I didn't know, how long I would be gone for and where I would be going and what I would be doing. So I requested to go to Federal Prison Camp Pensacola because at least it was a work camp, meaning that jail's not like what you see, at least prison camps are. I can't speak about other places on TV where you're in a cell and you don't do anything for 18 hours a day. At this place, you lived on a Navy base. There were corrections officers, who we called COs, who said, okay, look, those are the boundaries. Don't go over that line right there. Don't go outside of that fence. If you wanted to, you could walk off base at 1 o'clock in the morning and walk down the street and catch a train. But U.S. Marshals would be looking for you within probably 4 hours of that happening. So, there weren't guards with guns. It wasn't jail cells. It wasn't, kind of like what you would see on TV. But having lived in the Navy and served in the Navy for a while, I can tell you that we were in an enlisted bachelor's quarter room, which is usually a room that's made for 2 men.
Yeah.
And there's usually 2 beds. Sometimes it's 4 men, where there's 2 bunk beds on one side, 2 bunk beds on the other. And then there's lockers, like the lockers we had in the military. The room that I was in had 12 men in it, in bunk beds. So it was extremely cramped accommodations. It was, the worst possible sleeping conditions. Obviously there was no AC, so when it's hot in this, this isn't, you're now a federally convicted felon. You're not so as much as people say it's club fed, in 6 months I lost 40 something pounds. There's zero nutrition ability. It's like the stuff you do see on TV.
When you walk in, first day there, you're like, am I gonna have to fight somebody?
Yeah, so I don't know, right? There's no I guess there's probably coaches, I don't know, who would tell you, hey, here's what to expect, here's what to prepare for. The lawyers do a good job of saying, look, get your affairs in order. You could be gone for 10 months. If you have bills, put them on auto pay. Your family, if they're going to want to come and visit you, they're going to have to get signed up on the guest list and get cleared to come and visit you. So I had to get somebody to bring my daughter to come and see me, and I had to explain to her, at the time, obviously she was a lot younger, so I'm like, hey, daddy's working here for a while, and I can only see you once a month.
Yeah.
And, you can only come to this one place, which was cool. It was like, imagine staying at a Marriott Residence Inn and having the pool and the playground area to hang out in, and you can eat snacks and all. It wasn't nearly as luxurious as a Residence Inn, which is not that nice, but so you're told to get your affairs in order. I don't know what to expect, so we can talk a little bit about that. I think it was day 2, and I don't sleep at all the first night because I'm like, yeah, holy shit, dude, I'm in prison, right?
Yeah.
And people are coming in and out of the room all night, and they have to leave lights on in the hallways because it's a federal prison camp. So, I'm used to I got a nice bed, I got nice sheets, I've got, blackout blinds in the room, and now I'm every 5 minutes, you're hearing noises and you're this and that. So it's the second day, and man, we could do a whole other episode just on what this experience was like.
I know you have a good story about.
Yeah, well, so there was a guy who was dealing drugs out of our room.
Yeah.
And there's a guy in any room in a prison camp. There's somebody who's the senior person in the room, so they can choose what bunk they want to sleep in. They set the groundwork and the rules for the room that you're in. And so the rules in our room were hey, we're kind of like old white guys who are convicted of, white collar crimes. So no dealing drugs, no bullshit, no this, no that. And a guy got put into our room who was a gangbanger from the Southeast who was there on drug charges, and he was still going to sell drugs, and he still had to make a living. So he was dealing drugs in and out of our room. And in a camp, if somebody is caught with contraband, or let's say drugs or a cell phone, then everybody in the room gets held accountable for it, and you leave the comfortable confines of your federal prison camp and you go to the special housing unit, which is the county jail, which is a real jail cell with a metal bed and a toilet in the corner and bars, and you don't eat for 30 days. And so it comes to our attention that this guy is dealing drugs, and the guy who runs the room says, look, I'm going to go talk to the corrections officer. I'm not going to get this guy busted, but I'm going to have him moved out of our room because we're not being held accountable for this guy. So everybody gets up at 4:30 in the morning or so, leaves for work at 5 in the morning. You go to the Navy base, you come back, and then you're done at 3 in the afternoon. You eat your dinner at 4:30, and it's lights out by 9 o'clock. So we're back in our room, and we had just had dinner, and OG, who is the drug dealer, finds out that he's being moved to another room because the CEO calls him down to his office and says, hey, man, I know you're doing whatever you're doing. You can't be doing that stuff. If you get caught, and we're putting you in another room, basically with a bunch of other shitheads, that way when we catch you all. And so the guy comes back to our room, and he has this meltdown freak out with all the guys in our room. We hold a room meeting, and he's like, what the fuck, and who do you guys think you are, and I'm gonna get you, and I'm gonna this, and it's day 2, bro. I'm in jail, and I'm like, man, why is it always got to be a racist thing? Why are you picking on the white guys? We didn't do this and we didn't do that. And there's 3 Cuban guys in the room. There's 3 black guys in the room. There's 3 white guys in the room. Like, none of us want any of this shit, bro. Like,
yeah.
you know, like, and he gets in my face, and in my head, it's like, oh shit, this is the thing you hear about, like, you either fight or fuck. I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know it's a camp, and probably nothing's gonna happen. But I don't know. So I just look at the guy, and I'm like, I say something to the effect of, like, I mean, I don't know if you know who I am, bro, but you better do your homework before you get in my face, because there's going to be 3 hits. Me hitting you, you hitting the ground, and the ambulance hitting 80 on the way to the hospital. So, drop the shit right now, because I don't know. And everybody's just kind of like, oh shit. Like, one guy moves and he stands in front of the door in case a fight breaks out so no one can see in the room. And I'm thinking, like, okay, it's going down. And the guy just looks at me, because I'm about a foot taller than him and about 60 pounds heavier, and he thinks. And then he goes and he comes back to the room like 30 minutes later, and he's like, all right, we cool, we're good. And I'm like, man, what just happened? And then this guy explains to me that he went and talked to the guy who's in charge of the gangs there, and the guy who's
another prisoner that kind of in the hierarchy of the prisoners and the gangs.
So in general, a camp is the final destination for other convicted felons who have been convicted of much more serious crimes, who may start out at a medium security prison, and then they move to a low security prison, and then the last 4 or 5 years that they have in their sentence, they serve out at a camp, and that's their reward for the good behavior that they exhibited. So there are real criminals there who have done
some serious shit,
like real shit.
Yeah,
there was a guy that was there that was there for 1 week because he got caught. He got a DUI on base, which is a federal felony. So he was serving a week. So this poor guy looked like, a deer in the headlights. And then there are guys who were there on 40-year sentences who were serving out the last 6 or 7 years. So those behaviors that they learn at real prisons where real shit that goes down that you see on TV stay all the way through camp. So there are black gangs and Puerto Rican gangs and white supremacist gangs, and, if you wanted to, you can get drugs, you can get alcohol, you can get cell phones, you can get somebody to run to Chick-fil-A and bring it to you. You can get all that stuff done. You just got to do it through the gangs. So unbeknownst to me, this guy goes to one of the gang guys. The gang guy goes to the white supremacist guy who's like, hey, there's a white guy. He's some big ex-military dude. I don't know what his deal is. And they're like, yeah, no, it's all good. Like, this isn't anything to get a beef about. All this happened behind the scenes. And I'm just like, yeah. Am I gonna get shanked in the yard?
Yeah.
Like, is something gonna happen? I don't know. I mean, it is funny now looking back, and I'm certainly not trying to make light of this situation.
No,
because,
of course.
For the third now time in my life, I've faced this incredible trauma, and I'm here in this place, and regardless of whether I think I was right or wrong, whether I think I was innocent or guilty, like, at that point, none of it matters. I'm here.
Yeah.
And there's another interesting thing that when I do talk about this, which is not often, and it's therapeutic for me to talk about, so thank you, because I appreciate not only that we become friends and that we share a lot of stuff in our lives, but I think that this is so hard to explain, but it'll make sense to you. You don't realize how fast your life is moving and how many things are going on in your life. I liken it to, you're an automobile that's in the HOV lane on 95 heading south doing 75 miles an hour. And then all of a sudden, and I'm sure you can relate to this with what you've been through more so than me, the car goes off the rail, the tires are blown, the engine blows, you're in the breakdown lane. And what I mean by that is, I'm this busy guy with a life and a business and a personal life, and I'm going to trade shows, and I have a cell phone, and I've got 300 messages in a day and 500 emails in a day. And now there's no cell phone, no job, right? Like, no life, no social life. There's no physical human contact with another human being. You're completely isolated, and you're just in your head.
Yeah.
For however many hours a day that you're going through the motions of doing what you're supposed to be doing, whether it's, getting on the bus, going to work, doing the job that I did, going to the gym, working out, getting on the elliptical, but you're in your head 24 hours and all those other distractions are gone. And man, you literally relive every single moment of your life, every decision that you made. And you ask yourself, how did I get here? What could I have done differently? is this the bottom? Like, is this as bad as is it gonna get? And I went through all that stuff, man, you know, just like talking to God and journaling and reading books and trying to figure out, like, okay, where does my life go from here? And you know, for me, I had set up a way for the company to try and continue without me. I'd removed myself from the company. So fortunately, the company wasn't named in any of the charges. It was just me as the individual, as the owner of the business, along with the guy who I defended. So I'm like, okay, the company's going to survive. You know, it's not the end of the world. I'll have a job when I get back out, and, you know, I'll pick things up and I'll dust myself off and I'll figure out how to do this. And I leave, and man, like,
the company implodes.
So the first thing that happens is I'm allowed to call my lawyer. And when I call my lawyer, there's a special room that you can go to, and I have to call my lawyer because I'm arranging for my daughter to come and visit me, and I'm trying to get some work stuff taken care of. And so you're not supposed to be like working while you're gone, but I am allowed to talk to my lawyer, and no one's allowed to listen to those calls. So I'm talking to my lawyers, and I'm like, hey guys, what's going on? What's this? What's that? I want to do an appeal. I want to get out early. I want to do whatever you can do. And they say, listen, man, you've had like 3 of your biggest vendors sue your company because X, Y, and Z, various reasons why. And, you know, they want their monies back, or they want this, or they want that. And so my $30-something million a year business, just like my personal life, like someone pulled the e-brake, and it just starts to implode. And I had left my lawyers with power of attorney to do certain things for the company. I had empowered some of the employees to do things like, you know, signature authority to sign checks and payroll and all that stuff. But the company's just imploding and it's dying. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that, you know, that's kind of the short version, right? So I get home from Pensacola, and I have to be on probation for a period of 3 years. And the concept of probation is, look, don't do anything stupid, right? Like, don't fuck up.
Yeah.
But if you do, you risk getting sent back into the prison camp. So, you know, I'm thinking like, okay, my life's not completely over. You know, I'll either restart an aspect of my business. You know, I've lost all this weight. I'm in great shape. My head's a little clearer from all this stuff I had to think about, and I'll do. And like, I'll be good. So I go in on July 31st of 2019. I get out on February 13th of 2020. COVID. And you have to laugh, right? Because I'm so like, all right, like, I'm going to travel and I'm going to get my life back and I'm going to do that. What do you mean there's no Tortuga Music Festival this weekend? It's been canceled? What are you talking about? I have tickets. What do you mean I can't travel to do, like, no, the world can't shut down. I just got back. Yeah. I got to go back. And there were so many silver lining blessings in COVID for me, which a lot of people are, you know.
I feel the same way about COVID was different for everybody.
Yeah.
We had a great experience during COVID, you know, God bless. So I understand when you say that. It's a different experience
like
for everyone.
Blessing number 1 of, you know, 100 blessings was I get to homeschool my daughter. She has special needs. She's on the autism spectrum. So I literally set up 2 workstations on my, you know, kitchen island counter thing. And Lily's at school in class, and Dad's, you know, right on the computer next to her. I decided to day trade stocks and equity options during COVID because I had to do something to generate money, but I didn't have a job. I didn't have a place. And that's a very interesting segue into something else. So, you know, silver lining, right? I get to spend every day, and then we take a lunch break, and I'm like, okay, baby, let's go play, and let's go to the pool. And I got this amazing, you know, 2 years of quality time with my daughter that I never had with my boys because, you know, I was a dad building a business. I was traveling for trade shows. I was, you know, leaving to go work out in the morning and then go to the office. And then I was home every night for dinner, and I'd be at the lacrosse games and I'd be at whatever. But, you know, I never had the entire work day to be next to my boys and get that, you know, kind of bonding time and quality time with them. So that was really cool. But I think as we started to emerge from COVID and the world started to open back up again, I'm like, okay, I've been, you know, trading stock options for a few years, living off some of my savings, but, you know, I got to get serious and I got to do something. But I'm not really a guy who's ever been an employee per se. Like for 15 years, I built that company that I built, Tactical Products Group and TAC Pro Gear and TPG Black. And I had my government thing, which I did, but I wasn't like, my resume doesn't read, Dan was, associate and then
manager,
vice president, and then
yeah.
senior vice president, and then whatever. Like Dan kind of was this guy who did his own thing, and I can't talk about what I did in the government because that's not public information. So, but you know what? Like TPG was a real company, and I built it from zero to hero. Let me just go ahead and get a job for a while until I figure out what I want to do. So I get on LinkedIn and I start updating my LinkedIn profile, and I hire somebody to help me put a resume together. And I'm like, all right, this is cool. I'm going to get a really good job. And like ego aside, you're like, okay, I have some pretty good skill sets. Like I know what I can and can't do, and I know what my comfort zone is. I don't mind getting out of my comfort zone. I'm just going to sit back and like...
let the jobs come to me.
Was it like Alex, I think, who you had on one of your podcasts? It was like, hey, I'm an SF guy. I'm Green Beret.
I love that. He's gonna put his resume down, and everyone's going to be
fighting for me.
Holy shit, it's Jason Bourne. Yeah.
Exactly. Same thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm the TPG guy. Like, I'm a known...
Don't you know my company? Yeah.
Like, I'm a horse that if you bet on, I'm going to win, place, or show.
Yeah.
No doubt, right? So I start pushing out resumes, and I'm like, all right, here we go. And then it's like crickets, right? And I'm like, okay, well, let me call a few more people, Let me call a few more people. And, epiphany is, dude, you have a felony, right? So I disclosed that to people. Well, I can't really work in the government contracting world that I used to work in, but if I do, I can't really be a principal that has to sign for anything because that's something that gets disclosed. So that's a big part of my background, but okay, let me pivot and let me focus more on like the civilian side of brands like Arc'teryx or brands that we're familiar with, where they want to be able to create a presence in an area where I was able to do that successfully. Let me reach out to these guys. So I'm applying for positions at companies like Arc'teryx and outdoor companies and people that want to get into the tactical space and footwear companies that want to sell, to the military and it's nothing, dude, right? And then I start looking at local jobs and I get a really interesting opportunity to go and work for a company. And then, you get back to that third meeting or something and I still don't know how to say it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still not working for somebody, which we'll talk more about as well. But I'm at a stage where someone's making a job offer and I say, listen, I don't know how to talk about this, but there is something in my background that I want you to be aware of. And there is something that happened to me and I'm owning it. I'm accepting it. I'm not proud of it. In fact, I'm embarrassed about it, but it's something that happened to me and it's behind me and it's in my past and I want you to know. And they're always like, oh yeah, like, hey, that's cool. Thank you for telling us.
But now we're going to put your resume in this pile.
Well, they don't tell you that, They're like, we'll get back to you.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh man. So yeah, it's been this crazy. And now, so here's another aspect of it, which I would like to talk about for a moment. Ask me questions anytime. I'm also single at that point because I had been divorced back in whenever it happened. And, you can't really date during COVID.
Yeah.
Because, you can, but I don't know. And I'm not an online guy. I'm not going to do apps and Tinder and all that. It's just not my thing, right? So I'm trying to meet people and I'm trying to get out and I'm trying to be social and the world's opening back up. But then, how do you tell somebody, it's not first date material.
Is that a second or third date type thing?
Good question.
Maybe end of the first month after the first vacation?
And it's also maybe not everybody is as open-minded or thinks about it the way I am. I'd like to think that I know now I'm the best version of me that I've ever been in my life.
Sure.
Despite all this shit I've had to go through, right? And there's this podcast that I love that Sarah turned me on to. You heard me talk about him all the time. Ed Miletti's my favorite, but one of the things he talks about is I'm addicted to the expansion of who I am as a person, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm always trying to grow. I'm always trying to be more self-aware. But you're riding this fine line of hey, listen, just so you know, I got a felony, and if it's a problem for you, if it's an embarrassment for you, I don't wear it on my chest like the scarlet letter A, but it's a brand that I'm always going to have and it's never going to come off. Maybe I can get a pardon or something and we can get this undone, but is that a problem for you? And I'll never forget the first time it came up with Sarah, and I don't know how to talk about it. It's not something that you practice, and I'm like, hey, we need to have this talk. because things are getting serious, and, you know, I really care about you a lot, and, you know, I want to see where this goes, but is this a problem for you? And she just looks at me and she's like, yeah, no, I knew. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I Googled you, man. Like, who doesn't Google somebody these days?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to go on a date with some guy who I didn't Google. And, you know, but I'm glad you're telling me, like, can we talk about it? And, you know, can I ask you a couple questions? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And,
we also live in Florida where there's so many people with felonies and misdemeanors.
I mean,
white collar crimes.
You know, if you're an actor or an actress in Hollywood, I feel like you probably don't get to the A-list until you've gone to rehab a couple times and you really fucked up a couple things, you know, so I do make jokes about it. It's not funny and it's not a light subject, but
it's how, I mean, it's the same thing with like getting injured and losing my legs. You have to be able, look, in the beginning, I obviously cried about it.
Yeah.
Tons of tears, right? But then I like was over it, and I was like, all right, now I got to get up out of bed. Now I have to figure out what's next. Now I got to figure out how to walk. Like, I knew what my like goals were, what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be, and I had a vision in mind, and I'm going, right? But part of that too, and I think maybe it's just because who I am as a person, my experiences in the military, you know, being on a team, whether it's a lacrosse team, a hockey team, a special forces team, you know, you have to have a sense of humor about stuff. And I think that's part of being resilient, right? Is being able to chuckle at like the hardships, right? I mean, dude, there's so many times I remember in Ranger School, you'd be sitting there, you'd be standing in formation in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the night, getting rained on, not knowing what the RIs are doing. Maybe, are they changing out? Or are they going to have us go, you know, do some endless road march? Are we going to get put to bed tonight? Are we going to have to just like make a patrol base and get fucked with all night? And you're just there sucking. And like, I just remember turning to my Ranger buddy who was a Ranger Regiment kid, and he'd just be like, you just got to learn how to embrace the suck. And he would chuckle, you know? And it's like that resilient mindset of just being, you have to be able to laugh at it sometimes. And, you know, I can make jokes about it, and my friends can make jokes about it, and my wife can make jokes about it. And obviously it's been a while, you know, in the beginning, if you're making jokes about me losing my legs, I don't know if I'd have the same.
I can still shoot, bro.
Yeah,
you better
exactly.
watch out.
Yeah. But, you know, I just think it's part of being resilient and being able to find, like you said, the silver lining and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so, you know, you and I talk candidly about a lot of things. We talk about our faith. We talk about our family. We talk about stuff. I remember I was in Buds, and I had this instructor. His real name was Forrest Walker. I think he was a point man at Dev Group. But we were going through this incredibly shitty embracing the suck evolution. And I just remember looking at him, and we were cool, like, you know, respectfully cool with each other. And I said, you know, like, Instructor Walker, what's the purpose of this? Like, I don't even understand. He goes, let me tell you something, Dan Lounsbury. There's going to come a time and a point in your life where you're going to be going through something that's extremely painful, uncomfortable. You're outside your comfort zone. You know, you're not where you want to be. And you're always going to be able to look back at this moment and think to yourself, yeah, you know what? I've been hungrier than this. I've been more tired than this. I've been more cold than this. I've been more uncomfortable than this. I've been more dirty than this. Like, you will always have this moment to look back on and say, no matter what, if I could get through that, I can get through this situation. And so I do think that, you know, having had some of these experiences that I had, not the same as what you had, but I think that helped form the mindset of, you know, I might not want to get through this and it might be really hard, but, you know, there's other things that I've been through that are hard. And I think also that, you know, with your faith, without necessarily like diving into scriptures and quoting things, I do believe that, you know, it was Mother Teresa who said God gives his strongest warriors his toughest challenges, right? And, you know, my joke is like, I just wish he didn't trust me so much, right? Because I keep getting hit up with these, you know, incredible life-altering challenges. And, you know, you get introspective, like, did I do something wrong? Did I do this to myself? Did I make a bad decision that forced my life to go in this direction? Yeah. And if so, what was it? Because I don't want to do that again. I don't want to go through that pain. I don't want to go through that suffering. I've gone through some stuff with my family recently, which I won't talk about right now. But it was something that was such a different level of pain and trauma, and totally turned me upside down on my head in a direction that I could have never expected I would go. And, you know, Sarah and I, we cried, we talked, we prayed, and, you know, I think if you don't have faith, I think I understand why people turn to alcohol and why they turn to drugs and why they get stuck in a rut where they just don't see any way out, because you keep getting knocked down. It is hard to pull yourself back up. Like, I don't know how you grew your bone and went through the pain of turning that screw every day. I don't know how you taught yourself how to walk again, but you clearly said, look, you don't know me. I'm not that guy who's going to be stuck in that wheelchair. I have to get over this adversity. And it was something in you that put you in the place where you had the mental mindset to be like, okay, look, this is just another evolution of my life, and it's another chapter that I'm going to have to go through that's going to make other things that I do look differently, but I'm not going to not do those things. I'm not going to not continue down those roads. And so, while our traumas are different, I think for me it's kind of the same, right? Like, I've had this thing happen, and I can either improvise, overcome, and adapt and move on, or I can be like, oh, woe is me, Ben, I can't get a job. Do you know anybody that wants to hire used to be, was once something? Like, no, I can't do that. I have to move forward.
So where are you, like, where are you now, like, moving forward? Like, what are some things that that you would say, like, oh, these are successes? Meeting Sarah would definitely be one, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so obviously coming through something that was really, really difficult for me, I realized something that I don't know that you and I have talked about it yet. We talked about it once a while ago, but I think that this is such a cliche, but hear me out on this. I think that for guys like us who want to serve our country, or other people who are first responders, or teachers, or doctors, or people who find a calling, for them, they find a life that has meaning because it gives them a sense of purpose. And it was sort of like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I found this thing that I really loved, and it was my calling. And I think for you, there was, as well as I know you, there was certainly a part of your life where, being in the Ranger Regiment, being Green Beret, being SF, you said this story one time where you're like, man, I'm in Afghanistan and I'm in my first firefight and I'm taking fire and returning fire, and I'm like, holy shit, like, I'm actually here. Like, all these years of getting ready to do this, and I am where I'm supposed to be, right here, right now. This is my calling. And I think that I thought I was where I was supposed to be in the Navy. And then I got my commission, went to BUD/S, got injured, boom, turning point. Okay, now what do I do? And then I thought I was where I was supposed to be in my civilian career. And then 9/11 happened, and I went to work for the government, and boom, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. And then I leave that career, and I go back to running my business, and I get charged with a felony, and boom, major turning point in my life. So I think that coming through all that trauma that I went through, and the shit I had to deal with, and then being at a point where I was coming out of that, almost had this sense of like, okay, I really gotta like open up my eyes to what's going on in my life, because I'm officially at the halfway point of my life if I live to this age, and I have to have the second half of my life be completely focused on going the direction that I have to be in. So we've talked about, like, I used to drink a lot. I don't drink anymore. I meet Sarah. I meet this person who accepts me for who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly, the funny stories, the hard stories, the bad stories, the felonies, the successes, the failures. And, it makes me want to not just be the best version of myself, but I want to see her be the best person she can be, because her being the best version of her helps make me be more of the best version of me, right? The best version that I can. And so your question was basically, so where am I now? And what role does Sarah play on that? I think I know I'm, for the first time in my life, in a relationship with the person who I'm supposed to be in it with, because that person wants to see me be the best version of me. And I think that that's really important, right? And I think that I'm emotionally and kind of psychologically in the headspace of, in order for me to be the best version of me, I have to focus on these things in my life. I have to focus on optimal wellness and on my body and on my physical and mental and emotional and spiritual well-being. So that's a big thing. Where I am professionally, is that, kind of part of the question? pretty much lost everything financially, and it would be rude and it wouldn't be appropriate to say where I was financially, but let's just say I was very comfortable,
sure.
right? Like I didn't ever have to worry about retirement. I didn't have to worry about where I lived. I wasn't like mansion on A1A FU money, but I was set financially. I lost it all. Had to find a way to start over, couldn't find a job, realized that in order for me to make money, support my family, and take care of myself, I'm going to have to do something with what I have up here between the brains. And so I turned back to the world I knew of doing kind of the work that I did for the government, but doing it in the civilian context. And so what does that mean? I have a friend who runs yachts and mega yachts and super yachts for ultra high net worth families out of Rybovich Marina. A lot like the kind of work that you do where, you run heavy steel.
Aircraft.
Yeah. And so he said, hey, look, I've got this client. It just kind of happened. He said, hey, I've got this client and he's this guy and I'm not really supposed to talk about who he is, but he's looking for some help on something. And I told you about you. If you're interested, then I'll set up a meeting and we'll go talk to the guy. And turns out the guy has a very big empire and he has a family office. And his family office needed some kind of like, I would say, investigative work done, but more than just investigative work, because they wanted somebody who had access to resources and certain skill sets that either I had or that coworkers of mine had, or basically work that I could do that I was trained on how to do. And so it just kind of started with that. And then I met up with a friend who knew me in the government capacity, and he runs a private intelligence company here in South Florida. So I started doing some consulting work for him. And then because my boys had been into crypto when they were in high school, I didn't realize that I had always had this sort of intrinsic crypto knowledge that I had taught myself about how the blockchain works and how cryptocurrencies work. And these worlds started to merge together, where I found myself doing advisory work for high net worth families, consulting work for high net worth families who wanted kind of what we would call special services. But I kept seeing this recurring theme of crypto, and where that is today. And by the time this gets shown, I'll have hopefully an even better part of the story to tell as an example. Is I started a firm that uses special investigative tools and AI and machine learning tools to forensically trace transactions on the blockchain, so we can trace cryptocurrency transactions. Specifically, what that means is I now have clients who I work for who are law firms who represent clients that have been victims of scam.
Gotcha.
Both crypto-related scams or financial scams. So I'm working on a very big case right now, which you know about, where the scammers stole over $1 billion, converted it all to cryptocurrency, moved the crypto all over the world, ended up in a country which I'm traveling to tonight, and working in conjunction with local law enforcement and local legal counsel. We've taken a U.S. judgment, and we're having that judgment enforced in this foreign jurisdiction. This morning, a travel ban and an asset freeze were issued by the courts in the jurisdiction where I'm going against the individual who is the defendant of this lawsuit and the recipient of these judgments. And so my goal for this trip is sometime during the next week or so, with local law enforcement and with local lawyers, we'll take this person into custody. We'll attempt to settle a judgment and collect an amount against this judgment that my clients are owed, which is it's over $100 million. It's a significant amount of money. And so, to do that type of work isn't really something where you're like, hey, I'm looking for this SF Army Ranger dude who's a Green Beret and an ex-government guy and a forensic accountant and a lawyer, and you may have to go to Panama, which is where I've been to 3 times. You may have to go to Europe. You may have to go to the Middle East, and then you got to figure out how to catch this guy. Like,
it's like a movie.
Well, let's talk about that. So to answer your question about sort of where am I now, I'm rebuilding.
Yeah.
I'm rebuilding a lot of aspects of my life. It goes so fast, and life is literally so quick. And my daughter just turned 16. Like literally, when you're young, all these old mentors tell you, hey, son, be careful. It goes fast. And Kenny Chesney says, don't blink. And then you're like, boom.
It's true, right? It's so true. But dude, that's super exciting. first off, thanks again for taking the time to come on here, because I know you're busy about to fly to Country X to go do Y.
Yeah.
And
Crossed.
excited to see how that turns out.
Thanks.
And this has been awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Thanks so much.
It's like chilly in here, man. I was
Right?
like starting to almost shiver.
All right.